Welcome to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast, the show where aspiring and experienced matchmakers come to sharpen their skills, grow their businesses, and elevate the matchmaking industry. Your host is Arlene Washburn, an award-winning ethical matchmaking advocate, mentor, and industry innovator. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Arlene Washburn, ethical matchmaking advocate and founder of the Love Pro Mastermind Academy and International Matchmaking Compliance Board. And today's guest is someone who is not afraid to shake up the dating industry with unapologetic truth. Tim Ash is a globally recognized expert in evolutionary psychology and human behavior. He is a best-selling author, keynote speaker, and the co-founder of the forthcoming book, Primal Dating, which actually is already here. I'm so excited to have you on this show. If you've ever struggled to explain to a client, and this is for the matchmakers who are listening, why their expectations don't align with reality or why the daters keep getting it wrong, this episode is going to give you language, insights, and maybe even a few wake-up calls. So, Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, Arlene, it's great to be with you.
I'm so excited about this conversation. In fact, I think this is the most excited I've ever been for any one of my episodes because I have had the privilege of reading this book, which I read in one weekend. I mean, it was so good and so riveting because I love the way you present the science and the research behind everything that you're offering, but it's palatable and easy to read. And I'm just curious, what inspired you to write Primal Dating, and what gap do you feel, it fills in the conversation about modern relationships?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, so I've written several books. My previous one was actually kind of a very readable overview of evolutionary psychology. It's called Unleash Your Primal Brain. And it basically describes what we share with all life on Earth and some of the bizarre late evolution that makes us distinctly human. But I had a chapter in there about sexuality, attraction, asymmetries between men and women. And all of my friends kept saying, I want to know more about that part. And so that's what initially led me to co-write Primal Dating. But what I actually found as I was writing is that this rabbit hole goes pretty deep. And what I came to realize is that we have this massive issue with relationship formation in general. And I think it has a lot of implications from men and women feeling like they're in a war against each other, to political radicalization, to a lot of frustration, declining birth rates, and the reverse of growth at a global scale. So this is really kind of a civilization-ending event that we're going through, and everybody's scrambling to adjust. Our goal to write it was a lot more modest. My amazing co-author, Dr. Limor Gottlieb, and I, we just want to help people at an individual level. So what inspired us was demystify a lot of things. And so people are doing things reality-based, and they get better outcomes because of that.
I could not agree more. And I just want to show everybody this amazing book. It's so important for people to really understand the science behind, the evolutionary psychology behind why we are the way we are, why we do what we do. And I know you argue that relationship success depends on accepting deep gender differences. What are the most critical differences you believe people overlook or deny, for that matter?
Well, okay. So when we say differences, it's funny because I was dealing with my daughter who's in college right now, and when she saw pieces of this book as we were writing it, she said, men and women are equal. They're exactly the same. There are no differences. And so I thought that was kind of funny. It's as obvious as gravity that there are differences. But what I have to make first is a distinction. We should all be equal at the level of human dignity and worth. That's not negotiable. That's like, I want the best for my son. I want the best for my daughter. I want the best for every human being on the planet. But to deny biological differences, well, if I say men are 25% on average larger than women, they're taller, they're stronger, they have 15 to 20 times more testosterone. Those are not things that just kind of randomly came about. There are other species where the male and female are basically almost visually and physically the same. That's not the case in human beings. So we evolved for complementary but very different roles. That's how I would say it. So we need to pay attention to that stuff.
Well, and I think it was, I'm trying to think, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, where he mentions that men are not hairy women because we, right? Because we are so different, and that's something that really needs to be inculcated to children from the day that they have to understand and respect differences between each other, even though we have, like you said, equality and all that good stuff. But if you expect something from, I always used to make the analogy, if you don't expect your dog to talk back to you, then you accept it and you move on from that, right? But
Right.
people have these expectations of each other that are so unrealistic and so not in line with the way a woman would handle a situation and the way a
Mhm.
man would handle a
Yeah,
situation.
so I'd say they're massive asymmetries. That they're complementary. We need each other. This is not a war between some, red pill incels and
Right.
feminist shock troopers. I mean, nobody wins if only one side wins. We need each other, and that's unavoidable. So it's a better understanding is kind of what I'm going for. I think we live in this weird moment where there's like three things that are conspiring to make things a lot worse.
Mm.
And the first is not really understanding the evolutionary psychology or the biology or what we spent 300,000 years on the plains of East Africa evolving for. And then there's the massive social and technical changes going on in our society. And then there's the fact that we're very cultural creatures and we like to cling to our cultural beliefs because being part of the tribe and agreeing with what the tribe says and parroting that is our survival edge. We're not individually strong. We're not fast, or we just copy really well and are really good at group stuff. So I think that the first thing I want to focus on is like throwing off some of those cultural beliefs. If you want to give you a few examples.
Please.
So this stuff goes so deep that we think it's ground truth. And so I'm going to say a few things and then just do kind of an internal check. Do I agree with this? Do I like it? Do I reject it? Because there's
Mhm.
going to be stuff in these statements that everybody hates and everybody loves, not the same stuff. So let me do a few. Women should be financially independent.
Hmm.
Men are all violent rapists. Women carry original sin. It's the fault of the patriarchy. Marriage is a lifetime institution decreed by God. Men are biologically superior in logic and leadership. Gender is a social construct. Hookup culture empowers women. Sex before marriage is a moral failure. Monogamy is unnatural and oppressive. You get the point that there are going to be things there that you're like, yeah, right on. I'm on whatever team that is. And there are other things like, are you kidding me? What kind of medieval barbarian are you? Right. The point is that all of that stuff is cultural overlays. So what we're looking at is the level of the biology and the evolutionary psychology that's in all societies across all time. If that's not the case, then it's not bedrock yet. It's just a cultural belief.
Thank you for the distinction because we're talking about evolutionary psychology, and a lot of people may not even know what that means.
Hmm.
So, if you could repeat that meaning, because that will help inform anybody who's listening to this conversation.
Yeah, to me, it's one of the most foundational things if you want to understand human behavior in general. We evolve for a purpose. So you can think of it as we share things with fruit flies and insects, right? We share things with other mammals. We share things with other great apes. And then there are things at the end of our evolution that make us distinctly and bizarrely human. So if you want to understand human behavior, you have to understand what environment we evolved in and what those pressures were. And those are deep-seated things that aren't going away. In other words, evolution has effectively stopped. All the cultural stuff and technical changes are happening really quickly and have massive pressures on us. But we evolved to be in a small tribe of a few dozen people on the open plains of East Africa 200,000 years ago and not get eaten by the lions and run over by the rhinos. And, hopefully survive, even though we were weaker, slower, and less coordinated and had worse hearing and worse eyesight. So our superpower is to have figured out how to evolve for that. And we did it by having big brains to learn culture. So it's kind of like a life hack. How you survive is carried through to you from your tribe. It's that cultural knowledge that gives us the edge. It's not our physical skills.
Yeah. And what's interesting is the outcome of evolutionary psychology today, like even if you're growing up in different societies, there's certain things that are going to remain in common as humans. And I think that's what really it's like a big experiment that we get to see over and over again, that this is the outcome. One of the things that you introduce in your book is the idea that the dating market value is a biological asymmetry or asymmetrical.
Mhm.
Can you explain, like how it shows up in the real world dating behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way to think about evolution is it's a pairing process. It's kind of like the closest analogy I can think of is like your junior high cafeteria. All the cool kids sit with all the other cool kids, and the medium cool kids sit with the others, and then the nerds and the outcasts sit by themselves or with other nerds and outcasts. Basically, mating is that. It's have a pretty efficient sorting algorithm so people find somebody that's roughly their own level and they mate with them. I mean, nature doesn't like big imbalances. That's why we have mate guarding and jealousy and things like that. If someone could clearly do better than you as a partner, then you're going to always be worried about them and jealous and trying to control their behavior, which again is a perfect example of that thing, trying to read their social media posts and see who they liked and that kind of stuff. So that's an example. But the point is that evolution doesn't care about your happiness. It says find a roughly equal mate and reproduce and be with them long enough to have viable offspring. And then those children will grow up to be adults who have their own offspring. So life is kind of ruthless. And that really hasn't changed. One of the other asymmetries is that women are the gatekeepers of sex. Men decide who to approach, women decide who to sleep with, and men decide whether to invest in that relationship over the long term. Those are the three decision points that we talk about. And one of the things about understanding about women is women are much choosier. One of the things we know is that mitochondrial DNA, sorry to get so technical, only passed down through the mother's genes. We can tell how diverse that is. And then the X chromosome, or the Y chromosome rather, is passed down through the male line only. And here's what we know. There were half as many women in the gene pool as men. Or sorry, twice as many women in the gene pool than men. So half of men didn't get to reproduce. Women were much choosier, and they were the gatekeepers.
That's an interesting thing that you mentioned, but also in our society today, we have some serious problems. And I don't know. I mean, I have completely leaned into supporting matchmakers and training them and getting them involved to help facilitate connections, because I really think that in the real world, men and women are having a hard time connecting. Everybody's
Oh yeah,
online, and online dating has really changed the landscape. It started out as like a good thing, interesting thing. I met my husband online.
yeah. Kind of
That
cute.
was 15 years ago. But now it's the bigger, better deal. It's the, let me keep swiping. This culture is so screwed up, and there are so many men that are being left behind. And I kind of
And,
want to talk a little bit about that with you, because I would love to hear your perspective of what's happening to men today.
yeah, well, let's talk about these pressures and some of the imbalances that are happening. Okay, so this essentially started with women taking control of their reproductive destiny. So starting in the 1960s with the pill and birth control and so on. And once that happened, and some women could enter the workforce, what you found is like if your culture or society didn't do that, if you made women wear burqas and stay at home and have kids, then you're only having half the economic power. So every society was forced to throw women into the workforce. I mean, some women may like it and choose it, and that's all great, but it wasn't an option really once that ball started rolling. Right. And so once we have birth control and women can decide when have a career first and or not have kids at all or have kids later, that changed the behavior a lot. And it also changed the risk reward of having sex. In other words, women weren't necessarily afraid of getting pregnant, which is a huge risk traditionally and historically. So they could avoid that baby lottery by using birth control. And so it changed their behavior. And by the way, women now cheat a lot more than they used to in the past, and so on, partly because of that. But the other pressures are what you mentioned, online dating. So there are many more men online than women on those sites, and you know this. And then they also, like I said, men are the ones that make the first approach, right? And they've turned their response up to 11 or 111 actually on a scale of 1 to 10 because there's no consequences. I swiped right. I didn't get rejected. She didn't give me the stink eye. She didn't embarrass me in front of my friends, right? So it's much easier to make the approach. And as a result of that, a lot of women have an inflated sense of their desirability because they have an inbox full of hundreds of men that all want to, are attracted to them. But I think that women confuse the offer of sex or attraction with the offer of commitment. That's the real test. Okay, because women again are wired to want long-term provisioning and protection because our helpless babies take 25 years for their brains to be fully mature, right? So that's not just you don't want to have a guy that cuts and runs. So women are placing these high stakes bets, and the question is, how do you find the right man? And that means somebody that can provision for you, or traditionally that's what it meant. That's what we evolved for. And so they confuse, hey, I'm 60, I still look good in my Lululemons and men are hitting on me all the time. Great, but that's not an offer of a committed relationship. And I think and then on top of that, there's one final factor, which is stranger danger. One of women's deepest needs is to feel physically safe. And again, they're weaker relative to men. So they don't want just protection from other men. They want protection from you potentially. They don't know if you're somebody that's going to do something really horrible to them. And that's always kind of lurking in the background. And so women are designed to reject strangers until they get to know them. And guess what? Online, everybody starts as a stranger. Every man you see online is a stranger. So you combine all of that and have is like essentially a very inflated sense of their value in the sexual marketplace on the part of most women. And then, I know that's a lot, but feel free to
No,
unpack some of
it's
that.
no, and I don't disagree. And also, I mean, because I always hear this thing of like, oh, I intimidate men, and I was never a proponent of that statement. I always felt that you could be off-putting, or there's a certain man who's just insecure, but I don't
Mhm.
think that it's just an intimidation factor. Whereas I do feel that sometimes men don't have an appreciation for the amount of fear, not that we're damsels in distress, but like
Right.
fear that women encounter in the world in general, walking down the
Yep.
street,
It's one of the
all
things
that
we talk
stuff.
about in the book.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and it's a huge thing. But now I find though that because more women are going to get a college education, or more so than men, and they're moving up in the workforce and all of that, and on top of that they have traditionally dated for hypergamy, looking for
Yeah.
someone who's doing better than them.
Yeah.
What is happening now? Because I feel like, are the women's standards too high now that they can't meet a guy? Because I can't
Well,
tell you how many wonderful women are out there looking for a partner, and they don't feel that anybody's good enough for them.
yeah, yeah. So I'm glad you brought up hypergamy because this is a very important asymmetry. So again, if you think about it at the big picture, the woman's going to place all of her eggs in one basket and rely on one man to stick around long enough to provision for helpless kids that take a long time to be functional, right? The man has to be the kind of man that can take risks and provision on a consistent basis. So the biggest, I would say, kind of root asymmetry between men and women is that women are conservative by nature and men are risk takers by nature. So if you
Mhm.
look at most psychological or behavioral things, you have a bell curve of behavior. And men's and women's bell curves are pretty close. One might be a little right or left of the other. But what's different is the spread, the width of that bell curve. So men, you have a lot more risk takers and a lot more cowards. You have a lot more geniuses and a lot more idiots. Whereas women tend to be cluster around that middle point, which is pretty much the same as men's on average. But what happens is that women, because they have this high risk thing, they have to get someone who's doing at least as well as them. They have to get their best option, and they have to be doing at least as well as them. And that's what we mean when we say hypergamy. And hypergamy just means I'm never going to date down in terms of what you can do for me. So if a woman's got her own career, her own college degree, her own house, then she's looking only at people that are doing even better. That's the one
Right.
universal. And so what's happening is effectively you have those top 5% chads that everyone's chasing, and they're the last ones to give you commitment and exclusivity because they have that optionality and they worked for it their whole lives, right? And then you have men who traditionally would have been a good match, but because strength and physical stuff and bravery aren't, they're considered just like Neanderthal afterthoughts at this point. Those men have effectively become invisible. One of the most shocking stats I saw was that under age 30 men who haven't had sex in a year has tripled in the last decade. It went from 10% of under 30 men to 30%. Now,
Yeah.
that you might say, yeah, whatever, so what? That is a lot of life force and intention that's going to get channeled into some ugly things: political polarization, violence, deaths of despair. We're seeing it all. 90% of men who are in prison grew up without a father figure. That tells you the importance of men to men and being raised right. But so you're right. So women got a giant boost. My daughter's majoring in computer engineering at a University of California. So fantastic. I want her to have a great career, but they're only looking for men that are doing even better, and that's a problem because men that historically would have been a good match are now effectively invisible.
That's a sad reality, and it really worries me. And I'm curious, a lot of matchmakers listen to this show, and they're finding now more than ever that there was a time where matchmakers essentially worked with men as their clients, women were part of the database.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now most of the people that are hiring matchmakers are women because they're looking
Mm,
for, and these are high achieving women.
yep.
How would you coach these matchmakers into, helping them be more successful with these women, and how should they coach the women for
Mm.
like real biological realities of dating?
Well, I think one of the things you touch on that makes me think about is in my book, I talk about Lamore and I wrote about crossing curves. So not only are there massive asymmetries between women and men, it's not enough to say you're a man or you're a woman. You have to talk about what life stage each person is in. So for women, here's the, again, biological reality. Your highest on average marketplace value or desirability, if you want to call it that, is at 18. And it goes down the rest of your life. And it goes down fastest between 20 and 40 when most women are in their reproductive years. And for men, it's the opposite. Men are useless when they're young. They're useless to other men because they have no skills. They're useless to other women because they can't provide an enticing enough lifestyle to attract them. So men peak around 50, so with a wide curve between 40 and 60. But basically, the crossover is 30, which is what most people traditionally call the biological clock, right? A woman starts going crazy at that time and try to lock down a long-term relationship because that's the age at which women have an equality or a slight advantage. After that, by middle age, you diverge so much that men, on average, have much higher sexual marketplace value than women, and that it remains for the rest of their lives. So I think that the advice I would give is to matchmakers is not very flattering. You have that choice of career or children, and you chose career first, and your value declined in the meantime. Your relative value is now negative. It's going to be really hard to find somebody good.
It is harder, and it's such an uncomfortable conversation to have with women, because I was just speaking to someone recently, beautiful, she's gorgeous, in her 50s, mid 50s, and she has decided to take a pause.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always like, please do not take, if you want a long-term relationship or you want to be in a committed relationship, do not pause. Prioritize it, not being desperate or anything. Just prioritize it, get it done, and then move on to the next thing. But people
Yes.
keep taking themselves off the market and then coming back in when they're I don't know how to say it in a in the nicest way. When your stock goes down, like
Yeah,
take
and it's gonna
advantage.
exactly, and that's a great point. So in the Primal Dating book, we have two guides: one for men from a women's perspective, and one for women from the man's perspective. And one of the things that we tell women is that you, your stock is going down, so waiting is not a really good strategy. But the other thing we tell them is don't lead with your accomplishments. I think that essentially women have largely been sold the lie that men appreciate your career success. Basically, that's a lie. At best, it's neutral. I don't care if you have your MBA, how much you earn. That's not why men are going to enter relationships with you. It could be worse. It could make things worse because you could have women saying, well, I'm the boss lady. I'm slaying it all day at work. And that's great. But it's not that men are intimidated by women like that. They just don't want to have, arguments or fights or see who's dominant in their personal relationship. So I think we need to put that old myth to rest that men are intimidated by successful women. They certainly just don't see that career success as a plus, and waiting is basically on average a mistake over time for women. So the advice I'd give young men is wait, increase your attractiveness, your game, if you will, your charisma, your physical appearance, and work on your career. The advice I'd give women is lock in a high quality early, and then if that doesn't work out, you can always have the career later, but you're not going to have the same optionality with men later. And that's really harsh, and people are going to accuse me of being a misogynist or something. No, that's just the biological crossover that Limor and I talk about in the book.
This is so interesting. And you have a daughter or multiple? You have
I have
two.
one daughter and one son, so I'm
Yeah.
getting it
So
from both perspectives. Yeah.
exactly.
And I wish them both the best, but I'd give them different advice.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it's hard when you're working with clients as a matchmaker or dating coach, and you want to, just be very honest with them and really let them understand and know the reality of it, like what the biology shows, which
Mm.
is what I love about this book because
Okay. Thank
this
you. Thank
book,
you. Thank you. I'm glad you like it.
oh my God, this book, you everybody's got to, I have to say, all the matchmakers out there and all the coaches, because there's so many people out there just spewing a lot of anecdotal stuff, but this is based on the science, the biology, and it might piss you off when you read it because you're going to hear things that you may not want to hear. But the reality is when you know better, you do better, right? And you
Yes,
make
thank you.
informed
That's a
decisions.
great. You want to do PR for me? No, I'm just kidding. But that's a great summary. It's like we want things to be reality based. You may not want to hear it. By the way, the book is really funny. I hope you'll agree. It's like we
Oh,
make the medicine go down easy. It's not a hard read, but it's going to challenge some of your long treasured assumptions. Let's put it that way. And one of the things I wanted to comment on, if I may, this idea of women. Um, what's the best way to put this? Um, Women wanting to have it all. The way we think about dating, and I think this is a great thing for matchmakers to think about, is the reason that mating evolved is for complementary needs. We need each other and we're asymmetric, but we have some value to exchange. Now we're thinking of it as like an optional want. It's like the cherry on my sundae. So one thing that I encourage both men and women to do, but women more so because of this distorted sense in the marketplace, is think about what you absolutely need from an intimate relationship that you can't get in any other way. You want someone to talk politics about? Talk to your same-sex friends. You want someone to go on a meet-up hike with? Do it. You want to go salsa dancing? Well, you don't even have to dance with opposite genders there. Go dance with your girlfriend if you're a woman. Okay, fine. But what do you actually need that you can't get in any other way? I think one of the biggest problems is that we think of this as like some kind of order a boyfriend from the boyfriend buffet. Six pack, six figure, 6 inch, whatever, all of that stuff, and those men don't listen. If they did, they have thousands of women chasing them and they're not going to settle down with you. Right. So if you just strip it down to pardon the pun, what do I actually need in a relationship? Then you're much more likely, again, to do things reality based instead of some fantasy Prince Charming wish list.
yeah, which is unfortunate that Disney had created this and the rom-coms and all of that has created this idea that you're just going to meet your Prince Charming. And I've had conversations with, well, I had a woman who was in her 70s still kind of thinking that way. And it's so sad because you waste so much of your time expecting to have one person fulfill all of your needs when
Yes.
you should have a life, you should have fun, you should be doing things. I think a person enhances your life in many ways, but they're not your life. So
Right.
it's really important to keep that in mind. Um,
I mean, think about all the roles we put on a in a typical couple. You have to be a provider. You have to be my best friend. You have to have the same friend group. You have to co-parent my children. That's all, and then a lot more. That's a lot of stuff. So, and again, consider the whole. I've seen on many women's profiles. I want someone who's my best friend. Well, how many of those do you have in your life? Chances are those are formed in your kid years or college years, and you might have someone's got a PhD on you is not going to be made overnight. So if you want like an instant best friend to pop up, good luck with that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I want to shift gears a little bit because we
Sure.
do talk a little bit about uh, non-monogamy being something that sort of fits into this conversation. It's in the book a little bit. Share with everyone your thoughts on this and what, people should know about monogamy.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we just again look at it from the biology part, what I think a lot of matchmakers are selling is that soulmate, happily ever after, long-term relationship, commitment, and that's really not what we're wired for. Human beings are designed to get together long enough to have these helpless kids, which means we raise them for a number of years, but not for lifelong monogamy. And that's really controversial, but one kind of biological evidence for that, if you look at other great ape cousins of ours, the ones that have a harem, like the gorillas, there's one over back and then the other men are sulking in the corner. They don't have any access. They have really small balls and they're inside their body because they don't need high capacity. Whereas our kind of freakier hippie cousin bonobos or pygmy chimps, to them, sex is just like, hey, you want a friend? Have sex. You want to groom someone? Have sex. You want to say hello? Have sex. It's like handshake with benefits. That's how they treat sex. And because of that, they have giant balls and they're air cooled outside of their body. And it's a matriarchal society because the only thing you know for sure is who the mother was, not who the father was. And human beings are somewhere in between. We have smaller balls. They're still air cooled and outside of our body. So it shows that there was sperm competition, that people were having sex within that 72-hour window that sperm can live inside of a woman's body on a pretty reliable basis. In fact, our sperm, some of them race towards the egg, but some stay behind to kill any incoming sperm from other dudes. That's a little extra, right? So why would biology dial that up and create that capability if it wasn't necessary? So it basically shows that we grew up in non-monogamous societies. And that hasn't really changed. So if you're rich, you have a lot of social media followers. If you're a cult leader, if you're a tech bro, they just do it differently. They might like trade off wives every 5 years. It's a lot more paperwork, but they're not exclusive. Muslim societies, you still have, it's legal to marry multiple people. Whatever your thoughts on that are, as a practical matter, it might be better for a woman to be the second or third wife of a really well-resourced man and not have exclusivity than it is to settle for some mediocre clown. And so monogamy, basically, that's not our programming. And we both cheat. We have different reasons for doing it. We're highly jealous. I mean, most other species, they're either having free sex, free love all the time, or they're lifelong monogamous. We're kind of in this awkward teenage years of exclusivity where we have pressures in both directions, a lot of jealousy and a lot of non-monogamy.
It's such an interesting thing how we have created a society that has just all these ideas. You went over a whole list of ideas of things that are not really based on reality or the
Their
biology.
cultural overlay is how I describe it.
That's beautiful, and it just complicates everything, doesn't it? Like, it just
Yeah.
makes it so much harder because you're going against your nature all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And so the idea is to at least be aware of your nature and to and to be nicer about the other person's behavior too. It's to be more understanding. Oh, I understand why you're acting that way. It's
Mm.
normal. It's to normalize it. It's not to reject it. That's kind of where what we're trying to do is have people have more empathy for each other.
Yeah. Well, I have a student right now who is a matchmaker focused on ethical non-monogamy. I personally and my husband, and we've had these conversations. We're like, yeah, we're not interested in anything else. This is enough right here. But I know that this is a conversation that comes up quite a bit. And in fact, I'm going to be interviewing her to understand that because I don't know that style. But it's so interesting. I'm going to shift gears again because I met a while ago and I sent you that documentary that I was on about the passport bros. And I
Hmm.
feel like this somehow fits into all of this, that these men are leaving, America, for example, and saying, we're done with these American women. We're going to this country to meet women that are more submissive, that they're not so career driven, and etc. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, I'm just going to put it. We try not to have judgments. We're just trying to explain things. Okay, so
Right,
so from
right.
so
No
from that
judgment.
perspective, well, I would say that um, the book is a combination of both evolutionary psychology and what's called sexual economics, basically the behavioral economics of the sexual marketplace. And so we do have a section in the book. There's men's guides, women's guides. There's the evolutionary psychology. Then we do talk about modern society. And one of the things is you have to understand how these dating and mating marketplaces work. Everything is a dating and mating marketplace. Your
Mm,
workplace, that's where you meet a lot of people. That's traditionally where people have met. Your religious organization, your online dating app, and there's lots of those. You want one for, kinky sex. You want one for Christian sex. You have everything.
mhm,
Each of those is a separate dating and mating marketplace. So the first thing you have to understand is which marketplaces work for you. And it's not an illogical thing to say, American women that have career success are and their expectations are too much work. So I'm going to put myself in a different sexual marketplace where my value is higher. Now you can talk about that as being exploitation if these are really like poor women in developing countries and stuff like that. There's truth in that. But again, they're trying to upgrade your life. You're trying to have the kind of relationship you want. So um, basically you should really consider what kinds of marketplaces you choose, which ones have your kind of people in them that you're trying to target and that
mhm.
you're most likely to have success in. And so certainly that kind of passport bro thing is one of many options.
Yeah, it's interesting though because what worries me, and no judgment here, because I've always said, it's anything between consenting adults is good. However, I also don't want the men to just fall behind and not keep up because you were saying about these asymmetries, right? And you're
Mhm.
saying that a man, and there's a whole list of things that you advise men, and we should go over that to maintain and to increase, if anything, their value and their status. I don't want to. I don't want to say it in a way that's diminishing in any way because I think human beings have value just by existing. But in terms of the dating place, right?
Mhm.
Instead of doing that, then you just leave and I don't know that
But, but,
that's
but you didn't leave. So let me just kind of push back on that a little bit because you didn't leave. You chose a different marketplace where you're going to be more
okay,
successful.
fair.
I mean, you can keep bashing your head against a wall until it's bloody, or you can do something again that's a realistic assessment of your pluses and minuses and where that's most likely to be successful.
Mm,
So it's I think the most frustrated people in our sexual marketplace right now are highly educated women and young men. And the
mm.
ones that are having the party of a lifetime are the chads, like the guys that, top 5% guys. Because they're swimming in optionality. Everybody else is really frustrated right now, and so we're trying to figure out different ways to deal with it. Is how I look at it. Then response, it's not necessarily bad or good.
In the book, you say that evolution has effectively stopped at our hunter-gatherer brains.
Yeah.
Why is that? I mean, I question this not know, I'm not an expert like you in this particular area, but why would it stop and not continue to evolve through the kind of lives that we have going on today? Like that. What's that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the right answer is the time scale we're talking about. So modern humans, I mean, identical to you and me, 300,000 years old. Be conservative and say 200. Do you know when half of the world went over to agrarian rather than hunting gathering?
Do I
About,
know?
yeah, about 16, 17, 1800.
Mm,
So what's happened since then, when most of the world has lived in either agrarian or urban societies, is a tiny eye blink compared to the 300,000 years and the many, many evolutionary pressures that acted over that time. So when I say it stopped, it literally hasn't stopped. It's going on, but that change happens generation to generation. And the change we're seeing in modern society is happening moment to moment. All these pressures have built over the last 30, 40, 50 years. So we can't adapt. It's going to take us thousands of years, evolutionarily speaking, to catch up. And that's if the AI doesn't kill us first.
oh my gosh, you must be in my brain, because my next question was going to be in about AI and how is that going to impact? Because even with men having been trained and raised to be the providers and all of this, and now with AI replacing a lot of jobs and professions for that matter, what's going to happen? And I mean, what are your thoughts? Have you even given this any thought? 'Cause
Well,
it's
I actually went to grad school. My PhD work for 7 years. I never finished it, but it was in AI, but a long time ago. But I'm not a futurist. I don't want to speak out of school here. So that's not some area of expertise for me. And I'll just be honest about that. Um, I would say that there are, massive pressures, and that they're accelerating. That's the problem. Is that so a lot of this stuff's not sustainable. In our lifetime, we're going to flip over to where relationship formation is so unlikely that the world's going to start depopulating. And we don't know where the bottom of that slide is. But
Mm,
just as quickly as we came up to 8 billion or so people on the planet, within our lifetime, it's going to start turning around, going down. And no country has ever been able to reverse below fertility replacement rates.
I know. This is a
That
problem everywhere.
Yeah. Europe is dying out. The US, if it wasn't for immigration, would be negative. You need about 2.1 births per woman. We're at, I think, 1.6 or 1.7. So if it wasn't for immigration, we'd be shrinking already.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And that kind of reminds me that you talk a lot about grandparents, and not a lot, but somewhat about the grandparents
Yeah.
and in the book. And I'm a grandmother, so, and my daughter is the mother, so which
Yes.
makes a difference. So tell the audience a little bit about that as well.
Well, I think we touched on this already, that
Mhm.
we grew up in times of uncertain paternity. You did not know who the father was. That's the reality of it. So if you take two generations up the family tree and you look at grandparents, the amount of care they're going to give to somebody is based on how sure they are that that's their genes in there, right? And the most sure are people like you. You are the maternal grandmother. You know you gave birth to your daughter. You know she gave birth to your grandchild. All good, 100% certainty. The least sure would be the paternal grandfather. Yeah, you don't know if grandma snuck off with someone else around the time their kid was born, and they don't know that his daughter-in-law didn't cheat with someone to produce that kid. So they're doubly uncertain. And so what you find across all societies is that the maternal grandmothers are the ones baking cookies and inviting your friends over to your house all the time and all that. And paternal grandfathers are like, yeah, whatever. And it's based on that uncertain paternity and the kind of a calculated decision of how much to invest in someone based on that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of men who have raised children thinking that those were his kids when they weren't biologically.
Well, actually, that's only about 1%.
Oh,
Um,
really? That's it?
yeah. So what we have is a very, like, jealousy is our burglar alarm system. Like if we think somebody's putting their attention somewhere else, but because our jealousy burns so hot and so strong, there's actually very little cucking or raising someone else's children. You have these paternity services that say it's like 10 to 30%, but that's like saying, we're going to see the percentage of criminals by judging people that are in a courtroom. Well, I mean, they have a reason to suspect infidelity. That's why they went to the paternity service, right? So it's really about maximum 2%. So most people are raising their own children.
That's so interesting. When I was doing a lot of coaching and matchmaking, particularly coaching, I would always encourage individuals who were in a relationship to reconsider moving in together until they
Mm.
had that commitment. Because anecdotally, I felt that just moving in wasn't going to, if your end goal was to get married and have children and to have a long-term relationship, not, I'm not saying forever, but long term. And I know you touch on this in the book a little bit. What are your thoughts about this, people living together?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So again, let's break it down to bare minimum. We want you to pair up with someone roughly equal to you, and we want you to have kids that can in turn have kids. That's life continuation. That's the only pressures that evolution cares about. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, if you get together with someone and kids aren't coming along, something's wrong. And so there have been studies that say people that live together for extended periods of time before having commitment or getting married or having kids are less likely to stay together, because that's biology's way of telling you, it's like, hey, go find a partner that actually will produce a child with you. So cohabitating without kids, which a lot of people do, will make sexual desire go down and make you feel worse about the relationship. That's been proven in large scale studies.
No studies if it's relative to their age, because obviously, if you're a middle-aged person, then living with someone, moving in or getting married, whatever, is a different story where there's no expectation of having children.
Well, here's the other part that, again, nobody wants to talk about. It's like, I'm ready for the real deal at this stage of life. I'm looking for my person, that kind of stuff. If you're past the window for having kids, or you've already had your kids and you're trying to for round two, evolution doesn't care. It doesn't care about your happiness. It doesn't certainly care about whether someone's there to, with your do not resuscitate order to unplug you from the machines at the end of your life. That is a completely unrealistic expectation to have, that we should have long-term relationships in the second part of our life, in the post fertile part of our lives. Now, technically men can do it longer, like Anthony Quinn is notorious for being 82, I think, when he had his last son, and he was recording video messages so you'd at least know him a little bit. I mean, that's sad. Of course, men's sperm get older and don't work as well either. But the point is that after 40, I think if you end up in a long-term relationship, you're lucky.
Mm.
It's certainly not the design, because at that point, your role as an elder is to help your children with their children. It's to carry on culture. It's to be a support system, to be somehow useful. But no one gives a crap about your relationship happiness, at least not evolution.
Wow. What can we say that is fun? Well, I will say this. So I've read recently some studies that about women being happier being single than in a relationship. I can't even quote the study, to be honest, because I
Mm.
don't remember it, and I'll have to look it up and send it to you. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, because I wanna bring something upbeat and exciting. I guess evolutionary psychology is could care less about that.
Well, I think that here's the good news. The quote unquote traditional marriage, a lot of people only go back to the 50s for that, or at least landowning and how the patriarchy took over and all that. But if you just look at how we were before, women had a lot more agency. They were deciding who to have sex with, how many partners to have, whether to be in exclusive relationships. You have that kind of freedom now. There's no rule book. You can do the professional, or rather the accepted, socially acceptable, monogamous, long-term relationship thing, and you can go off-roading. And there's, like you were talking about, ethical non-monogamy and serial monogamy, having one relationship at a time, but when it's run its course, you continue on. You could be casual about it, although that has its own kind of biochemical consequences. But we have a lot more freedom in how to structure our lives. And I think a lot of that very narrow, you have to fit into a certain mold, that's gone away. So that's the bad news, is that we don't have any guidebooks for this new terrain, but we do have the freedom to explore it. And so I think this is the time for courageous people to take an honest look at themselves and see what they really need in their life. And if you really don't need an intimate relationship, I mean, that's fine. It's not a requirement.
That is the challenge that you bring up. The freedom and not having a construct makes
Mhm.
it, I think, a lot harder for people to, because autonomy, I mean, it's great having autonomy, freedom, I'm all for it. But I think that the lack of construct is really confusing
Mm.
everyone. And you talked about people meeting at work. I think a lot of men are afraid to approach women at work
And
because,
rightfully so.
yeah, so we have to start doing something. And I know governments are getting involved, and I know like Japan started something with an app, and I'm like, get away from the apps, because I don't think technology is the answer. I think, why don't you create centers where people can go hang out and meet new people in person,
Yeah.
right? So that if a guy is short but he's got a great personality, he's amazing, you don't give a shit. But if you're online and you're just looking at heights online, you're not going to give that guy a shot.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And again, going back to the women's assessment of stranger danger,
Hmm.
the best thing a guy can do is to meet a woman through other women or through shared activities,
Oh,
because they already have a stamp of approval, and they're not dangerous in the, going to attack you sort of way. So I think that you're right that online was fun, was cool 20 years ago, dating apps. I think that what I'm hearing is it's very hard for those to continue because they actually want to sell dissatisfaction. They want you to keep subscribing, which means you have not found a relationship. So the whole
mhm.
business model tells you that they're not out there to make you succeed. But on the other hand, I would say matchmakers are just too much, not promising, but expecting that lifelong monogamy or soulmate or committed relationship should be the outcome. And I think people should be looking in that messy middle ground, that gray area. And again,
Yeah,
taking stock of what do I really need out of an intimate relationship. It might be I see somebody once a week. It might be we move in together. It
sure.
might, it might be we create a blended family with all of our kids. They're not traditional options, but they're certainly available. And there are communities to support every flavor of ethical non-monogamy or anything else that you want. So there are more and more guidebooks as people actually start practicing various ways of living.
And I think, to your point, I think a good matchmaker is not an order taker. They're actually there to help strategize and help you really get to the core of what your needs are.
Yep.
Because everybody's got this want wish list, but the
Yeah.
reality
Yeah.
is what do you really need out of a relationship, and what
That
does
you
you
can't get
need?
any other way. That's the part I add to it. What do
Yeah,
you need out of an intimate relationship that you can't get any
and
other way?
I love that. And so now you have a set of criteria that is meaningful, and someone's going to go out there and do the investigating for you and the research for you, and the grilling of a person, because once you go on a date, you're not going to go grill someone at a date, right?
Right.
You're going
Hopefully not. That's not a fun date. That's a
to,
job
right.
interview.
So that, I mean, to me, that's the beauty of matchmaking, because we actually, you interview people and you ask them a million questions before you even say anything about the client, so that you can see where this person's head is at and whether or not they're going to be potentially compatible. But
Yes.
nothing's etched in stone. I mean, it's not like we're all perfect, but I do think matchmaking is a great vehicle to solve the problem in the world
Well,
today.
I think that one of the nice things about online dating sites is they're actually showing us revealed behavior. When large groups of people are doing something, that's pretty close to evolutionary psychology. That's just what we're wired for. So I think one of the things that you mentioned, the filtering aspect of matchmaking is important, and I agree with that. But I think an equally important one is the mindset stuff. It's understanding these kind of evolutionary psychology things and stripping away those cultural overlays and belief systems and working on getting their clients' head straight. That's the biggest problem as I see it.
Yeah, and it's not even you. I know you said getting their head straight, but it's like getting rid of all the stuff that's been imposed on them, the beliefs that they have because their parents told them,
Yeah.
because society told them, and getting to the bottom of what do you believe, what do you need, and getting to the core of the person so they can go find someone that has the same core values and key life values. That's I don't think AI is going to replace it. And that's why
No, I agree with you.
yeah, I really want, I would love for everyone, the same way everybody knows a realtor, I want everyone to know a
No,
matchmaker.
matchmaker, right on.
And I also want to encourage every matchmaker to read this book and to send it. So when I was a matchmaker, I would always send a book to my clients that I felt they needed, whether it was the 5 love languages or attachment styles, anything that I feel that's really going to help them, since I'm very science based, to like, don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. Look at the science. This is
Mhm.
repeatable studies that have been done over and over again with a good cohort, and these are the results. So you might be the butterfly or I should say the unicorn or the snowflake, but in the majority, this is what's happening right here. So go get that book.
Yeah, and by the way, Arlene, I just want to, I know that you're using that language, but my last book, Unleash Your Primal Brain, was a popular science book. Okay. This is a self-help book. So I want to assure anybody that you're hearing you right now about the science, there is not one single footnote in there. Okay. It's all conversational, and it's not going to overwhelm you with some kind of scientific jargon or detail. It's very practical.
Yeah, that is such a great point, and I think that's why I got through the book over a weekend, because it really holds your attention. It's funny. It's very palatable for anyone who, it's not talking over your head. Because, like, Dr. Helen Fisher, who I met a few times, and
Mhm.
I read her books. They were very science and very like textbook books
Yep.
explaining evolutionary psychology and all that. But in this case, this is for everyone. That's why I'm suggesting that matchmakers send it to their clients,
Yep.
even if they're not into the science, because it's explained in a very palatable palatable way, but also talks about what's happening right now in our society and the dating. What was the term that you use?
The dating marketplace.
The dating marketplace and the overlay of you know
Oh, the just the cultural beliefs. Yeah, the cultural overlay.
thank
Yeah,
you.
and by the way, so the book is basically in 4 parts. It's like the evolutionary psychology stuff, modern society and the dating marketplace, and then the guides for men and women, they have different chapters for like insights and mindset stuff, strategies, and then there's tactical stuff. So the tactical stuff, fix up your profile and your bio and do dates better. That's practical, but I'd say that 90% of this book works for current relationships, for you and your husband. I'm sure you've taken a few things away. For your kids, it's not about dating, it's about understanding mating and connection and intimate relationships and how the other sex actually, what we evolved for.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Dr. Gottlieb that couldn't be
Oh,
with us
he's
tonight.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Right.
know she writes for a lot of the different magazines and stuff like that. And, I really appreciate what you both have done. And Tim, thank you so much for pulling back the curtain, giving us a raw, research-backed look at what really drives attraction, relationships, and dating today. And for all you matchmakers out there, and dating coaches, and industry professionals that are tuning in, if this conversation made you uncomfortable, good. Because growth begins where comfort ends. And it's time to stop selling fantasy and start equipping clients with truth that they can actually use. So if you want to learn more, check out Tim and his work and go to primaldating.com and follow Tim on LinkedIn. We'll have all the information in the show
Yeah,
notes.
and by the way, the book right now is available in paperback as well as ebook, Kindle format on Amazon. We're probably not going to do, a lot of people have asked, an audiobook till sometime next year. So unless you really, really want to wait for that, I'd say get one of the other formats.
Yeah. No, it's an easy read, so I highly recommend it. And if you found this episode valuable, please share it with your matchmaking peers. Leave us a review on your favorite podcast platforms. And if you're a matchmaker who wants to stay on the cutting edge of dating, science, and business growth, visit lovepromastermind.com to join our training community or apply to our next mastermind cohort. Thank you, Tim.
Oh, it was so much fun. Thank you, Arlene.
Thanks.
Have you ever felt called to help others find love? You might have the heart for matchmaking, but without the right training, Turning that passion into a thriving business can feel impossible. Most matchmaking courses give you outdated theories and a certificate, but no real-world strategy to build a successful business. That's where Love Pro Mastermind Academy is different. Our live Done With You training goes beyond theory, helping you develop matchmaking expertise, implement sales and marketing strategies, and master the art of client success. With expert-led instruction, accountability, and a community of like-minded professionals, you'll learn how to identify your niche, attract high-quality clients, create a seamless matchmaking process, grow a sustainable, profitable business. With over a decade of experience, we don't just train matchmakers, we create leaders in the industry. Are you ready to become an LPMA certified matchmaker and build a business that changes lives? Apply today at lovepromastermind.com.
Thank you for tuning in to the Matchmaker Mentor podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow matchmakers and friends. For more resources, training, and inspiration, visit lovepromastermind.com and follow us on social media. Remember, matchmaking isn't just a career, it's a calling. Let's keep building connections, changing lives, and growing together. Until next time, stay inspired and keep matching.